things we want to think about is cutting back on the amount of processed food that we utilize. So unfortunately, there's a really interesting paradigm here because we're preparing food in Langar for a lot of people, and sometimes cost becomes an important factor. And in Ayurveda, I want to just introduce a really important notion, and that is portion size. Portion size is actually really important, and to think about quality and quantity of food. So sometimes eating a little bit less, but higher quality food can be a really important element. So I know a lot of people work hard and they're preparing the food and it's coming from their heart and it's coming from so much love. However, when we look at the contents of how the food is being prepared, it may nearly be the absolute checklist of what not to utilize. So we're using highly refined seed oils that may be high in the type of fats that create inflammation in the body. So vegetable oil is less preferable than, say, canola oil. The seed oils, such as corn and soy, they create inflammation in the body. So if you're on a budget and you can't use, say, the best refined oils in the Ayurvedic cooking are ghee, but of course that would be very expensive for many gurdwaras. So next best thing would be canola, and if we can, an organic canola. When we look at the contents of how we're preparing the elements of the meal in front of us, always there's a beautiful heart that's coming in to make the choices about the food. So if we're thinking about nourishing the bodies that are coming to be present, we don't want to see a lot of white sugar in the food. So let's say we're going to have a sweet treat at the end of the meal. Kheer or other desserts that are really rich in high fructose corn syrup or white sugar are automatically adding inflammation without any nutrients to the body. So these are difficult because people are quite acclimated to that sweet taste after the meal. And that comes from, in the Ayurvedic tradition, that comes from all the heat and spice in the food. The body desires a sweet to nourish the body's energetic imbalance from so much heat. So while we're very well acclimated to the deeply heat and wonderfully invigorating meals, sometimes having a little less spice in the meal can shift the craving after the meal for a sweet treat or a sweet of some kind or another. It's an interesting experiment. I encourage you to try it at home. When we're coming in to make, say, for example, a saag can be made with lots of beautiful bitter greens, not just spinach. We can use other greens that are wonderfully nourishing to the body. Our teacher, Sir Singh Sahib Yogi Bhajan, said basically that you could make a 5 green saag, which is one of my favorites. So you can go out into the garden or go out into the place where you're shopping and bring in kale and spinach and mustard greens, all kinds of dandelion greens, all these bitter greens that are very invigorating for the liver and to get the body to be better health. And saag doesn't need a lot of oil. We can let that natural bitter taste come through, which is a very interesting thing. In the Ayurvedic teaching, bitter is a very important nourishing and cleansing, tonifying taste. So if we mask the taste of bitter with sweet or oil, we've lost the benefit of that plant to some extent. So cutting back on the amount of oil that goes into the vegetables and particularly saag. Now people might grumble and complain a little bit initially, and it takes a little bit of time to get used to, but then they start to feel a little lighter in their body. So for example, you might have what tastes really good to the mouth in the Langar, and then you go home and you really can't do much more that afternoon. You're sleepy and you need to have a nap. That's because the energy to extract nutrients and to find a home for all this heavy oil and sugar that we put into our body is taking all our energy from other things we might want to be doing.
Right. So there's 2 pieces here that really what we're talking about is quality of food and quantity of food. And so really finding specifics in each of those relationships. So when we talk about quality of food, no doubt organic, non-GMO is much better. There's definitely a lot of research that's saying that the pesticides and the Roundup that comes from the major crops and big agriculture is causing pathology and inflammation within the body. And because in our Indian tradition, heart disease, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, these are major issues for us, and they're starting at a younger age now for our young kids. Diabetes type 2, which was an adult onset diabetes, is now happening for younger kids. And this is very unusual for us. And so our diet is making a very huge contribution to this piece. So we really want to understand that if we're going to have foods that support a spiritual lifestyle and a relationship to Gurbani in a very profound way, that we may need to spend a little bit more money to have a relationship to organic-based foods and non-GMO-based foods. And this can help support a lightness within us. So the quality of the food, the quality of the oil, the quality of the nutrients that are coming in make a big difference for us. Then when we also talk about quantity of food, well, often the time when we have sog, which is a really good example of like a 5-grain sog, often the time we use a lot of milk product to create this heaviness feeling or to get this fullness in for it. But when we eat lighter and we have a nice relationship with Gurbani, we find over a period of time that we don't actually need to have as much portion. We don't need to eat as much. We get filled in with the Gurbani. Bukya buknotri, right? We just eat and eat and eat, but it doesn't fulfill inside because that fulfillment that we're looking for that we get from the food is not coming through. So we need to get it from the Gurbani and get that relationship, but the food helps supports that in our meditative lifestyle. So when we add milk or we add oil to the sog, that's non-organic based, that has a lot of pesticides in it. It has the cows that were made from it is not very good cows. Now in India, milk is known as a sattvic based food, a higher spiritual relationship. But everybody has a cow there. You can milk your own cow. It's in the villages, it's available. But here it's a big agricultural business. You drive by Harris Ranch in California, you can smell it. You know that the cows don't smell good. That's the milk that we're going to be drinking. It doesn't feel good for our body to have it. So if we have a lighter amount of milk or an organic-based milk, if we want to bring in that cream to that sog, it can then offset some of the pathological elements, the inflammation that gets created for us. And then it also means that we don't need as much portion size within it because of the way that preparing like a sog meal with these particular grains make it so that, I actually feel full from just a small handful of food, not necessarily a big portion. I need seconds and thirds, major chapatis that are coming in. Because after Gurdwara, we're just going to want to go home and fall asleep. That's always what we do. Or if we have a little bit of food during Gurdwara, we're going to be sleeping in it and not actually having the experience of Gurbani. Yeah. Paneer is the same way. Ghee is the same way. These are heavier based foods that then come in, and when they don't have a high quality to them, then it does create this inflammatory process. Now, over a long period of time, we're starting to see these chronic illnesses. And so we're trying to help shift the mindset about creating the right steps so that over a period of time that we have a relationship to food being nourishing for our body rather than pathological for us. That's a real big issue that we see in both our medical practice, that food actually is pathological rather than actually nutritious and supportive for us. This is a really important piece here because in our Punjabi community, we really have a disconnect to understanding how our bodies and our food that we put into it have an effect on our mind and our lifestyle and how we raise our children and everything a part of life. And we have to really come back to this. We must take responsibility for our health. This body